What you're looking at is not a lost civilization. It's a missing piece of humanity, completely uncontacted, and this footage is something humanity was never meant to see. One of only a handful of never seen before footage of the 196 remaining tribes still living outside the modern world. But in this specific encounter, just like so many before it, this day would end in panic, blood, and tragedy.
Surrounded the boat and they started firing arrows, and everybody else could hit the deck as fast as he can, and one arrow came in just above his scapula and came out.
Because while we see them as primitive, isolated, cut off from the modern world, they see us as something else entirely. In this video, we're going to map where these tribes live, their thoughts about us, and trace the first recorded encounters that changed everything, and stay until the end, because the final encounter reveals the most dangerous group even governments refuse to approach. It's October 2024, deep in the Peruvian Amazon. Conservationist Paul Rossoli is standing near a remote river watching the tree line. Hidden nearby are long-range cameras because on the other side of the jungle is a group of people who have never been contacted.
Cell phone from 100 meters away of the uncontacted tribes, and we're sitting there with, 800 millimeters with a 2x teleconverter. And
until now, the only evidence they existed were distant, blurry images, and what Paul is about to witness will be filmed closer than ever before.
we see as they come closer, they start laying down their. See, he's laying down his bow and arrow. They understand. No mole.
However, there is one behavior shared by almost every uncontacted tribe. Day one always begins the same way, not with contact, but with watching. What you're looking at here is not curiosity, it's surveillance. From the tree line, a single figure steps forward. Anthropologists believe this individual is not a warrior, but a leader. He doesn't approach first, he observes. After everyone calmed down, the camping crew gave them some bananas, and their reaction was nothing out of a movie.
You see as though they're rushing in, there's this desperation, they're hungry.
Is that in the water? Is that Ramo in the water? In that case?
Within seconds, the bananas are gone, snatched, examined, torn apart. And then something even stranger happens. When they noticed how the boat stayed afloat, they began to play with it, spinning it, rocking it, testing how it moves. Because for many uncontacted tribes, boats are not tools. They're completely an unknown concept.
Percy Fawcett encountering the tribes. We've heard of anecdotal accounts of the tribes. This is the first time that the tribes have been filmed, that we can hear their voices, that there's a documented interaction happening.
But nothing prepared them for what happened the next day. The camera crew believed that by offering bananas, they had earned the tribe's trust, but that was never what the bananas were for. Among uncontacted tribes, food is rarely a sign of friendship. It's a boundary, a way to measure distance, intent, and weakness. And while the crew thought the exchange was over, the tribe was still deciding something else entirely. And little did they know, by giving them bananas, they had made a grievous mistake.
Our friends in the community had said, okay, the tribe is gone. We gave them all the things they wanted. We gave them sugarcane, bananas. We said, please come back. And George was driving a boat, and there was people on the boat. And as they were going upriver, 200 of the tribe ran out, surrounded the boat, and they started firing arrows, and everybody else could hit the deck and get under the benches and hide. George was driving, and he was leaning back as he's driving. He's driving as fast as he can, and one arrow came in just above his scapula and came out by his belly button. And so he had that 7-foot arrow tip through him. These people came out of the jungle and they asked for bananas. We gave them bananas, and we, in every way possible, said we mean peace.
While Paul believed he could win the tribe's trust with bananas, food alone was never enough, and history had already proven that way before 1991, on one of the most isolated islands on Earth. But in 1991, for the first and only time in recorded history, the Sentinelese tribe located on an island in India allowed peaceful contact. Anthropologists approached by boat, and no weapons were raised, nor arrows fired. Instead, the tribespeople stepped forward and collected coconuts. This peaceful moment was unique, and for a brief moment it looked almost like cooperation. However, this did not signify ongoing friendship. Later visits often saw a return to hostility or complete avoidance. By the mid-1990s, Indian authorities stopped regular contact attempts, instead enforcing a hands-off approach to protect the culture from disease and cultural disruption. But this was only until 2004, when a massive tsunami tore through the Indian Ocean, that government scrambled to locate survivors, and rescue helicopters were sent across remote islands, including one place no one was supposed to land, North Sentinel Island. However, as an Indian Coast Guard helicopter descended, something erupted from the tree line. A Sentinelese tribesman stepped forward, bow drawn, and fired. He tried to shoot the machine right out of the sky. Photograph of that moment was captured by the Indian rescue team and spread across the world. For the first time in modern history, the message was unmistakable. Stay away. That image reignited global fascination and fear, but no one took it less seriously than missionary John Allen Chau. In 2018, convinced the island was Satan's last stronghold on Earth, he illegally traveled to North Sentinel to convert the tribe. Moments after stepping onto the beach, he was killed by tribal warriors. The warning had already been given. These tribes have been isolated for over 50,000 to 60,000 years, and they are only around 50 to 200 people. They do not practice agriculture, no writing, no metalworking. It's like the human version of people living in the Stone Age. However, as fascination with uncontacted tribes grew after 1991, the world became obsessed with one question: what do these people actually think of us? And then, years later, another video surfaced online.
Danger. His breathing is short. A sign of fear.
This time, it wasn't the Sentinelese, it was the Tulambi tribe. The footage showed something no one expected. A small team made contact carefully. At first, the Tulambi didn't panic, they didn't run, they didn't attack, they just watched. Then, one by one, they walked closer. They touched skin, they touched clothes, they touched the equipment, not to greet, to understand. Following a pattern used by early explorers, the crew introduced a mirror, an object that had historically fascinated isolated tribes. Anthropologists later explained why this moment was unsettling. The Tulambi had no stories about outsiders, no myths of pale spirits, no tales of sailors, no memory of past contact. So they weren't reacting with fear or excitement, they were studying. In their culture, strangers aren't judged as friendly or dangerous. They're treated as unknown variables. And what happens next is why the footage went viral. One crew member tried to impress them. He showed how sharp his knife was. In response, the tribesmen brought out their own tool, not in fear, but to compare. A silent reminder that even people living on the same land can be separated by centuries of time. But these are only 3 out of 196 known uncontacted tribes on Earth, each one living in a different time, some separated from us for thousands of years, others for tens of thousands. Scattered across Africa, the Khoisan people also practicing hunting and gathering, having been documented into a movie that became a global hit. Asia, South America, Australia, entire human worlds, running in parallel to ours. And when researchers compare encounters across continents and centuries, one unsettling pattern keeps appearing. These tribes weren't equally hostile to everyone, they were far more hostile to Europeans. And nothing prepared the early European explorers for what they would encounter in the 1500s and 1600s. The year is 1528, just 10 years after the Mona Lisa was quietly completed in Europe. Far across the ocean, another race is underway. European explorers are scrambling to finish the discovery of the Americas. But for Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca, nothing is going according to plan. After a shipwreck along the Gulf Coast, he becomes one of the first Europeans in history forced to live among completely uncontacted tribes in North America. Not as a conqueror, as a captive. Over the next 8 years, Cabeza de Vaca is enslaved, traded between tribes, stripped of status, forced to walk thousands of miles barefoot. He learns their languages, their customs, their power structures. And when he finally returns to European society, his conclusion shocks everyone who reads it. We were not gods, we were helpless. These tribes weren't amazed by Europeans, they were unimpressed. And the most revealing proof came after Magellan, when explorers believed they finally understood human behavior. Despite Ferdinand Magellan trading peacefully with them, the tribes of the Philippines were never relaxed. They watched everything, every movement, every weapon, and every gesture. And the moment Magellan tried to force his authority, the tone changed. The tribesmen began to sing, a slow chant, almost ceremonial. The explorers were confused as they thought it was ritual or fear. But what they didn't know was that the singing was coordination, as the tribesmen warriors carefully poisoned their arrows, using the rhythm to time each preparation. And seconds later, the jungle erupted. A storm of poisoned arrows flew from every direction, and European armor meant nothing. Firearms were useless at close range. The explorer and most of his men died with him, resulting in a failed exploration, one that would shake all of Europe. However, the explorers were determined to their expeditions of the uncontacted regions in the Amazon. This time, the explorers arrived with glass beads, mirrors, and gold, objects they believed no human could refuse. And just like the Talambi tribe, the tribes rejected all of it. Instead, they asked for something else: iron nails, broken blades, scrap metal. At first, Europeans assumed superstition, but they were dead wrong. These tribes had already learned to cold hammer metal, reshaping scraps into tools and weapons without furnaces. And that realization terrified the men writing the journals, because it meant the tribes weren't confused. They weren't primitive. They were just living in a different version of the Iron Age. So the pattern continued for centuries, with several hostile encounters. Every tribe that successfully avoided contact became what we now call uncontacted. But over 500 years, their numbers collapsed, from an estimated 2,000 independent tribes to just 196 remaining today. Not because they failed to adapt, but because they refused to integrate. But here is what we can learn about them in the way they see us. They don't see humans as advanced or from another world. They think in practical categories that we are unknown beings, dangerous beings, powerful beings, temporary visitors, not superior, but just unpredictable. They see us as unknown variables, and unknown variables get avoided or eliminated. A helicopter isn't wow futuristic. It's simply loud, territorial, and therefore associated with death or disappearance. And that's why watching always comes first. While it's hard to pinpoint the most violent uncontacted tribe, the Sentinelese are often labeled the most hostile today, for reasons history made unavoidable. But there's one last encounter that reveals something even more unsettling: Solomon Islands, 1940s, deep in the Pacific. Uncontacted islanders watched the ocean change. They saw Japanese and Allied forces collide, ships exploding offshore, bombs falling from the sky. So when these tribesmen saw this across the ocean for several years, they believed two groups of powerful beings were fighting. Humans caught in between were collateral spirits, and therefore, some tribes refused contact for decades after, convinced that outsiders bring cosmic war.